because I didn't post it until just now, but whatever.
Mm-hmm.
It's Monday, September 28th, 2020. I'm Rim.
I'm Scott.
And this is Geek Nights. Tonight we are talking about source code leaks and why they aren't always a big deal, but sometimes they are. So I've had a problem for not a while, but just recently, like over the last couple months, that was very infuriating to troubleshoot. And it's a very domain specific problem. The problem was I would get ready to record Geek Nights, like we do with this COVID era remote setup. And I turn on all my stuff. I got all my templates. I got Audition open. I got OBS open. And I joined the Discord channel to be able to talk to Scott. And so Scott can send me his video. And I sound like a robot in Discord. But only in Discord when Scott hears me. If I preview myself in Discord, it sounds fine. It's like this really weird problem. Now, being an audio engineer and knowing a lot about audio hardware, the one thing I do know, the way I am able to engage with this problem at all, because if you Google for robot sound, most people will think it's a bandwidth issue or a CPU
so many people
issue.
Describe their audio problems differently, and so many people are having different problems, and it's like you can tell that the problem they have is not the problem you have. And
yep. Like when someone who's not an audio engineer describes a problem to me, I can be like, it's this. Or I can just listen to it and be like, it's this. But if someone describes it to me and they're not an audio engineer, if they say robot sound 99% of the time, they just don't have enough bandwidth or their CPU
we should have actually recorded some noise. I could actually intentionally record some with the actual robot sound. And it's basically a specific kind of robot sound.
Like
and you can
stuttery, like bida. Like you sound like the whole time.
It sort of increases though as like it's like if I don't talk, you won't hear it. But as soon as I talk or talk louder or more, you'll hear it more.
Yep.
Right. It's a kind of distortion almost like a.
Yep. So distortion is how I would describe it to an audio engineer. But anyway, so I know this is a sample rate mismatch, and I have fancy professional hardware using ASIO. So I suspect that what's happening is some bullshit application running on my computer is telling the hardware to use the wrong sample rate compared to what the rest of my software told it, or some software I have is stupid and is assuming that the audio hardware is using one sample rate, but the audio hardware is actually set to a different sample rate. That is usually the cause of that specific kind of distortion. However,
right, your microphone is sending in audio at 48 kilohertz sample rate, right? And the device, your sound card, is set at that sample rate.
Yep.
And Audition is using that sample rate, and all your applications like, okay, we know to read data from this audio buffer, right? 48,000 times per second, right?
Yep.
If something reads from that 44,100 times a second, it's going to be all messed up because it's out of sync with all the other ones, and that's the specific kind of noise you hear when that happens.
And the magic part was my local recording and Audition is fine because Audition is the thing that is controlling my sound device through the ASIO direct drivers. So it's some fuckery in some poorly written application somewhere, and I can't figure it out. So I need to test it. I just didn't test it because I didn't have time. Like I had a plan to try to replicate the problem reliably and do like the technologist process of elimination to figure out what is causing this problem, figure out what software is being stupid, and then figure out how to fix it. But I could not replicate it reliably, and I hadn't tested. Just before we recorded the show, I was changing an unrelated setting for an unrelated thing, and I noticed something. I noticed that the sample rate that my PreSonus Universal Control, which is the device driver that gives my software direct access to my audio hardware, said that the sample rate was 44.1 kilohertz. And motherfucker, I'm looking at it right now. It's back to 44.1. God damn it. But anyway, I also saw that I could not change it. So the driver was saying that some software has instructed it to set the device to 44.1 kilohertz. So I go in all my software and I'm trying to troubleshoot this, and I close everything. I set it back to 48. It stays at 48. And then one by one, I open software until eventually OBS As soon as I open OBS, the video, I'm used to this in the discussion of video card drivers. The audio driver goes, oh shit, and switches in the UI to 44. And I'm like, you're the culprit, OBS. So I go into OBS's settings, and OBS says 48. OBS says it's using 48, it's setting 48, and it's not even fucking using ASIO. It's using MME. So it shouldn't even be able to set that sample rate. What the fuck? So then I close that OBS, and I set it back to 44. I open the OBS, it goes to 48. I'm finding the problem. Then I open Discord. It goes back to 48. So I found something online while I was talking to Scott, getting ready to set up the show. It's a Reddit post. Why does opening Discord change the audio sample rate? Discord requires 48K for reasons I do not care to inspect at this time. I suspect that is Discord. I don't know why Discord is that way. I don't even know if it is that way, but that appears to be the answer. Someone said Discord only supports 48K.
I think I've had it working in 44.
I have too, through MME, because MME abstracts a lot of this stuff. This is the kind of problem that only happens when you are using direct driver access.
Anyway,
the
problem I had was that I was having the same problem. Whenever I opened OBS, robot noise, right? And I thought it was a sample rate mismatch because OBS only lets you set one sampling rate globally for all of its things, right? You can't mix and match.
I had set to 48, even though that wasn't working, but separate problem.
I had it set to 48. So then I went and I tried to set everything in the whole computer to 44, and OBS still was making robot noise. Then I set everything in the whole computer to 48, every single thing. And OBS still made robot noise when I turned it on. I'm like, what the hell? And I found out there's actually a second setting where you can increase the buffer size on the ASIO device.
Yeah.
So I raised it from 16 bits, and I kept raising it step by step. Because you don't want to set it too high. It's like, well, why not set a huge buffer? It's only a few bits, right? It's because a larger buffer means more latency.
Yep. Right? And the whole point of ASIO and fancy audio devices is to have as little latency as possible.
Exactly. So I increased it one step at a time, and every step I increased it, the robot noise decreased. Eventually, I think at 160, it was like an occasional pop. It was like, it sounded normal, but occasionally just like tick.
See, that was the phrase. When you say pop, that kind of distortion will be like intermittent popping. Like it's a different, it sounds different.
But anyway, so I just put it up at 192, and that seemed to be enough bits to avoid the robot noise. So I think I'm good. Everything's working, right?
Yep. So I figured out just before the show the specific problem that was going on. And I'll link you all to some of these sources because if you're interested, if you have a Windows computer, it uses MME, which is like this generic, super abstracted Windows API and subsystem for audio. And it kind of just works, but it's also super shitty. And ASIO is the thing that the Chad hardware uses to do like real direct access. And all the other things are usually just a mistake. Like WAS API basically is what if you had an ASIO-like version of MME that crashed your computer all the time and sucked and caused problems. But these are the kinds of things you need to know if you're using expensive, fancy audio hardware and you're trying to figure out why you have two different microphones and you can't only record from one or the other at the same time. This is the stuff you just have to learn about audio engineering. But the final bug, in the end, is something so specific and annoying. The problem was, before, at the beginning of COVID, Scott and I set up a pipeline where Scott will stream to me with OBS. I will stream to me with OBS. I'm running a server that takes those two streams, merges them together with stuff, and sends them to an OBS that goes out to YouTube. I needed to run multiple OBSs on the same computer. I have enough power and hardware to make that happen. However, I had to set up a special OBS where my OBSs are all running in a local mode where they store all their settings locally in a subdirectory and don't store stuff in the Windows registry. The bug appears to be portable OBSs. If I change the sample rate
I don't think it stores them in the registry. I think it stores them in like your personal app data folder or something.
Yeah, I didn't actually look at the details of that. All I know is that if you run OBS in portable mode, it will store everything for that OBS.
Yeah, the portable OBS is designed to be put on like a USB stick. That way you can theoretically, if you're like a streaming, think about a streaming gamer type person, right? You go on a trip to a convention, you bring a USB stick with you, you sit down at a streaming station, you stick the stick in there, you turn it on, boom, it's your OBS with your sources and your scenes and everything already set up, right?
Yep.
So you're good to go.
You also use it if you want to have because OBS has a lot of annoyingly universal settings. So you might have two different portable ones. Like I have a very different OBS setup if I'm streaming a video game versus if Scott is streaming stuff to me.
Sure.
So it appears that if I don't run the portable OBS with administrative privileges, whatever setting I tell it to use for audio will just not get applied, and it'll force everything to 44.1 no matter what I've set. And I can replicate this reliably with a portable OBS not running in administrator mode. That's the kind of fucking bug you get with that kind of open source software that you cannot Google for the answer to.
Anyway, OBS is the problem.
Yep, of course OBS
for
was
a lot
the
of
problem.
things. And OBS is really, it's just I'm mad at them all the time because their software is bad, and also
but it's still better than most of the other streaming software.
Yeah, well, Twitch is making an official one. So that's a thing, right? Anyway.
But yeah, the moral of that is, I don't know, learn how to troubleshoot and gain the expert knowledge you need to troubleshoot the areas that you are doing non-standard things in.
You look for OBS problems on the internet, and you find way old posts that do not have good information in them.
Yep, wrong answers. Googling for OBS problems is literally just wrong answers only.
And even if you're Google just for what does this setting in OBS do, you can't even get a straight answer from anything.
Oh, there are two different delays that do radically different things, and I still am not clear on which one is which, despite having
read the OBS source code, I guess. We should read the OBS source code, even though it's probably horrible. Write good OBS documentation and then sell it. Sell it.
There are entire companies that do that remember Magento? There was a company that would sell me lessons on how to set up Magento, including documentation that was accurate as opposed to the Magento documentation. Shop.furrecruit.com. There's a reason why I never set that shit up for so long.
The last Geek Nights Monday episode was so long ago. It was the day before the Apple whatever, right? So we got tons of news. There's so much tech news. Let's try to go through it quickly.
All right.
So
really
starting with
one.
the Apple thing.
Oh, you want to do the Apple thing first? All right.
Because it was Apple Watches and iPads, right? And the thing that stood out to me the most about that was obviously iPhones are delayed, but iPhones have been delayed in the past, right? It's like they've always announced iPod in September for back to school. They replaced that with iPhone when they replaced iPods with iPhones.
Yep.
And then it's been even in years where they had problems, right? Like where they ran out of rose gold or whatever, or they didn't have enough glass for the screens or something, right? There were times where the iPhone itself was delayed, but they still always had that announcement at the September Apple event, right? Of the new iPhone every year, like clockwork. So for them to not announce iPhone means that the delays for the new iPhone are much more severe than we had been led to believe. Obviously delays because the world, life, right? But this is Apple, the largest, most powerful company in the whole world, and they still couldn't do it to the point at which they didn't even announce the new iPhone, right? That's a big deal, right? So it's like people said it was only gonna be watches and iPads, and I said that may be true, but if it is true, that's a huge deal, and it is. And as far as what they did announce, right? It's like, okay, most of that stuff was stuff we already learned when we were learning. Yeah, stuff we already learned when we were learning about the new version of iOS, right? But the advertisement, because Apple always has the videos they show, right? Their commercials that convince you to buy their products.
Yep.
And the sales pitch is almost always it's magical. It'll change your life. Here's happy people. Look how the Apple devices are improving their life experience. It's like a wedding.
Just turn it on. Everything's great.
Wedding or a vacation or some other life thing or everyday life chilling at home. And look how the Apple device and software makes everything magical and amazing and beautiful, right? That's Apple's marketing slogan. The marketing pitch for the new Apple Watch was not even joking at all. No sarcasm, is get an Apple Watch or die.
Yep, because they added blood oxygen sensing.
Right. So the Apple Watch already has heart rate monitoring. It has sort of an EKG thing. It's an EKG. And now it can monitor your blood oxygen level. They had people come on who weren't lying. They were like, hey, my Apple Watch told me my heart rate was elevated and I wasn't exercising. So I went and I went to the hospital and they told me I was going into cardiac arrest. The Apple Watch saved my life.
Yep,
and then they're like, hey, we got these new cheap Apple Watches. Strap them on your kids and you'll be able to track them and know what happens to them, right? Get an Apple Watch for your kids so they could die or be kidnapped. It was like a fear-based campaign rather than a hope and magic-based campaign.
And that's what's interesting, because that is such a market departure from basically all Apple marketing up to this point.
Yeah. I don't know if Steve Jobs would have noticed or approved of that, but
yeah.
I was not a fan.
Now, the technology is cool, but of course, there are caveats and risks.
There's nothing wrong with the technology. I mean, I'm wearing an Apple Watch right now, right?
Yeah, but also the health technology. Like, on one hand, this is collecting very personal, sensitive data. On the other hand, that type of data tends to be very heavily regulated. Like, there's a reason why
Apple is much better in the privacy game than everyone else, right?
But Apple seems to be working, and other companies doing this too. Increasingly, people are trying to actually get permission to do actual health stuff in technology, because usually it is not legal or allowed to do health stuff or make health claims or even track health data with software or hardware without FDA approval or other special things. I'm being vague here because I do not want to get into the legal discussion of this now.
Every time Apple does something like that, right? They always say, "Oh, yeah, we're partnering with such and such hospital, such and such research people." They don't do that on their own. They're always partnering with someone on all their health stuff.
Yep, because HIPAA and related things are really, really hard to deal with.
It always asks you permission, right? And they don't sell your data with anyone. They just use it to improve the product. And I actually believe them on that and that alone. There are many criticisms to go at them, but that is, you're paying them a fortune for the product. Why? Because they're not advertising or stealing your data, right? They're not lying about that.
Like a fundamental rule of all technology,
right.
If you pay for it.
If they were, there would be technologists would know about it. How many eyes are on Apple if they're lying about that, right?
Yep.
So
Now, granted, other companies just steal your data and throw it around all the time. They tell you they're doing it, and most people don't care, but they're not hiding the fact that they're doing it.
Nope. And they're giving you shit for free.
Yeah, the fact that Apple
instead of charging you $1,000.
But as soon as Apple says they're private, then people very much care that is not a lie.
Yep. Especially when they paid so much money to be private.
So in some other really, really brief news, you might have seen last time we talked, we said we're pretty sure Firefox Send is never coming back. They announced, like right after we did that show, that Firefox Send is in fact never coming back. They basically said what we said. This is why we can't have nice things.
Yeah, Mozilla is having all kinds of internal drama lately.
Yeah.
So, Firefox is still a thing. I still use it, but we'll see. We'll see what happens to them. We need to. It's weird because as much as their drama gives you reasons to be anti-Mozilla, it's like we kind of need them.
We need a Chrome alternative.
I'm sure even if they died, right, like the Mozilla Corp died completely, like 100% dead, that the browser, Firefox would carry on as just an open source project with a foundation. So I'm not too concerned. I think it might actually do better as an open source project with a foundation. And it's like, I still think it's funny that Mozilla Firefox is the alternative to Chrome.
Yeah.
And most of Firefox Corp's money, as far as I can tell, comes from Google paying them to keep Google as the default search in Firefox every year. So that's all I got to say about that.
Yep. So the video cards, I would like to get a 3080, and you can't get them. You just can't get them.
I don't need one. I'll wait for like a 5080 or a 6080 or something.
Yeah. The sole reason I want one is that I do have specific things I cannot do today that I could do with one, but also it's not just that. That alone is not a reason to want a 3080 right now, because you can get like a 1080 and do a lot of things. But I also have
my 1070 is still killing it. I was playing Doom Eternal full frames.
Yeah,
whatever.
Well, my 1080, so I can do like VR up to like the most you can drive a Rift with, but I could not drive like an Index to its maximum, like higher end boutique VR.
The Index is a better resolution than
the Index is like the best consumer money can get. Like if you want something that's better than the Index, you're getting an installation. Like that's where we are right now. And the 3080 can fully drive it. Like you can get the maximum experience. And I'm really like invested in VR right now. There are reasons why I want that, but that is not enough by itself. The other reason I want
it's a lot of money, even if you do get one, right?
Is
so
that
it's got to be worth.
I do need to replace my HTPC because it's starting to die. It's so old. Like it's failing me. And it has a GT 450M in it right now.
No,
so,
mine has like a 1050. It's probably gonna last forever.
Yeah, a GT 450 is like multiple orders of magnitude slower than a 1050.
Also, it's like a low profile kind of tiny guy.
Yeah, this is an old. There's like an i3 in there.
Oh
this
no,
thing's
wait, no,
got problems.
it's not. My HTPC case lets you put the video card in sideways. That's right. Anyway.
Yeah, my HTPC case does not. That's how old it is. It's tiny.
I thought it's the same case.
No, it's like this VCR looking thing.
Yeah, so is mine.
It doesn't let me put something in sideways.
Oh, my video card goes in sideways.
Yeah, my video card is in straight on, and it's a half-length video card.
Okay, it's the low profile. Okay.
Yep. So, I do need to build another HTPC, and I want to be able to do tethered VR there, and I want to be able to offload rendering to it. So I don't want to buy a video card for this thing. So buying a 3080 means I can take my 1080, put it in that thing, and actually save some money and be good for a long, long time. But I can't get a 3080. By the time I can get a 3080, I worry that 4080s will be on the horizon, and I might as well just wait.
No, but you're gonna get one of those, so you won't be able to get that either.
Yeah. Well, I don't know exactly what's causing these shortages, because this feels like the worst
I think
shortage.
the shortage is that NVIDIA underestimated demand, and then they didn't so they started selling them before they had built up a large enough supply.
Well, I think there were previous shortages were caused more by, like, there was a time when it was people are doing the stupid coins, mining coins. We're not. That's not a problem anymore.
No.
But I think the 3080 is just such a leap forward compared to the 20 series that it's like the time for people who have an older video card. Like we always say, when you're upgrading certain computer components like a video card, if you're gonna upgrade during a cycle, get in as soon as possible to get the maximum value, because things don't get cheaper over time.
If you buy a 3080 6 months from now, it's going to cost the same, and you're going to have 6 months less of it. Right?
And there won't be something better for a while yet. So like the 3080, like literally, I saw the 20s come out and it wasn't enough. The 2080 did not do enough for me compared to the 1080.
I did not like that NVIDIA went from they had 1080, right? Then they, instead of going to 1180, they went to 20.
Yeah, I'm also annoyed at 30. That.
So when they get to 90, what the fuck are they going to do? 180?
But at least
and then are they going to go 280, 300? They're going to start going up by hundreds and then by thousands, 1080.
Yeah, look at all the trouble people are having figuring out what Xbox or PlayStation to buy. Again,
they should have gone after 1080. It should have been 1180, 1280, 1380, 1480,
because
1580.
They have been very consistent with what 50, 60, 70, 80, 90 means in the last two digits. Like that is well known. The 50 is the low end or the mobile. The 60 is like the normal budget one. The 70 is for gamers. The 80 is for pros.
Yep.
The 90 is a little bit faster for twice as much money.
Yeah. So let's talk about the fiasco that's going on.
So even when people can get these chips,
people got the board, and some people were reporting that it was like, they would have things happen such as like crash to desktop, like you're playing a game and the game just disappears. Or
that's no bueno.
Weird artifacts appear on the screen, like, that show that there's like rendering errors in the math that the GPU is doing. That's the kind of video artifact you would see. So if you paid a lot of money and fought, tooth and nail to get one of these, and you were having that kind of problem, you're upset about that, right? So it was discovered that on the back of the GPU are the 6 capacitor banks, basically. And on the reference board, so the one that NVIDIA designed,
The
right, as like an
Founders
example.
Edition is what
Right,
you
the Founders
nerds call
Edition.
it.
Right. So basically, NVIDIA makes a video card to go, because NVIDIA only makes money really selling the chips, right? Other people make boards, right? You could buy a board with a chip from NVIDIA if you want to, but people don't. Right?
Yeah, you don't want to, with the exception I'll get to in a bit.
Yeah. People buy Gigabyte, EVGA, Asus, MSI. You buy your video card from someone else. They buy chips from NVIDIA, right? That's how it's always worked. So if you look on the NVIDIA made board, the reference board that NVIDIA makes as an example to show the other companies how to make one, right? To start with, you can see these 6 capacitor banks, and on the NVIDIA board, right? Was it 1 or 2, at least one of these capacitor banks is not just a single capacitor, but is like a set of like a whole bunch of little guys. Those little guys are better and more expensive than the one big one. So you could, if you wanted to, just like all 6 of the banks filled with the fancy expensive ones, but that would just be a pain in the ass and cost a lot of money.
Yeah.
Or you could do 6 cheap ones, right? Because it's the same capacitance. The thing is, what is the point of capacitors usually in a computer?
Power regulation.
Exactly. You're smoothing out the electrical signal, because there's all sorts of electrical noise just in the world, right? And you got this electrical signal coming in at a very high clock frequency. So you can, if you look at the oscilloscope, you see like a line, and it's going up and down, 5 volts, 0 volts, 5 volts, 0 volts, 5, 0, up and down. And if it's a megahertz of or gigahertz of very high speed, that line is moving very quickly, right, through your computer circuits. And if any noise interferes with that electrical signal, there might be a 1 where there should have been a 0, or maybe a 0 where there should have been a 1, right? A capacitor, right, or a whole bunch of them, really good ones, arrayed appropriately so, can help eliminate noise from that signal. Make sure that the 5 volts is 5 volts for a 1, and the 0 volts is 0 for a 0, right? And that any noise that was in there earlier doesn't make it through to the actual transistors where the signal matters. So if you put in these shitty capacitors and the clock frequency gets high enough where the sensitivity to small amounts of noise would be increased, right? If it's running slowly, right, at a lower, because all these GPUs and CPUs these days also, when they detect a high load and they say, well, I'm not too hot yet, what's the temperature? All right, the temperature is not too high, and the CPU's not messing up, and everything's looking good, I can go faster. And it's like, oh, we're too hot. All right, we can't go any faster. It's too hot now, right? Do we have enough electricity, right? Is the power coming from the power supply powerful enough to go faster? It is. It's not too hot yet. Let's go faster, right? And they go faster and they go faster. And especially these cards made by not NVIDIA have sorts of overclocking features, right? They're trying to go faster on purpose to make you buy an EVGA instead of an MSI. So those boards, they're going faster and faster. And faster you go, the more a small amount of error in the signal is likely to cause problems, right? Stability decreases, right? Noise in a more sensitive system matters more. And if you put in the shitty capacitors, the cheapo ones, then a 0 becomes a 1 and you got problems. And then your game could crash or who knows what. And that's exactly what happened. There's a video, we'll probably link to it, where they opened up a whole bunch of video cards. They made a 3080 graveyard out of video cards, and they showed you which ones had the reference design, which ones actually put in even more expensive capacitors than they had to.
Good on you.
And which ones put in 6 shitty capacitors, well, not shitty, but cheaper than the reference design, and neglected to use any of the expensive ones. And there seems to be, looking at reports, a very strong correlation between reports of crashing and other problems with the ones that have the cheaper components on them. And in the tests run by various gaming, hardware outlets that do that sort of thing, they have also agreed with this data. So if you're going to buy a 3080, you need to do your research on whether that card you are buying, which make sure that it's one of the ones that is made with the more
which
expensive
we haven't
capacitors.
had to do for a while. When I bought my 1080, I didn't care if EVGA or someone else made it. I just bought whichever one because they were all pretty much equivalent.
You're not even using the EVGA driver or whatever, using the NVIDIA driver. So what do you care, right? Who makes the card?
But now we care again.
Yeah, I mean, I only cared like how many display ports does it have, what cooler does it have, that sort of thing, right? I didn't care about who made it. But yeah, I think also what you're going to see is that the next round of cards that get delivered, or maybe 1 or 2 shipments from now, they're all going to realize that that's a problem, and they're all going to shift to the more expensive design. So,
and they're going to make a big deal about it too.
Yeah, right. So basically, if you buy one right away, you're just going to make sure you get a good one. But if you buy one months, years from now, whatever, you'll be all right. You'll at least as long as you buy a new one and not like an old model that someone's reselling or something.
It is interesting though that this is the one time I actually wanted the Founders Edition, because usually the Founders Editions, I'll link to a thing that explains this from the 1080 era, tend to have like shitty heat sinks and cooling, or they're loud, or like they're not really intended for normal people to use.
Yeah, it's meant to be a reference design for the actual video card manufacturers to copy from, but it's also, the benefit of it is that it's stable, right? NVIDIA tested the hell out of it, and they're the ones who made the chip. So it's like, yeah, it might not be that great from a customer's perspective. It won't have overclocking features. It won't have the most video RAM. It won't have the best cooler. It won't look the nicest. It won't have fancy lights or anything, right? But it's going to work stably. It's going to be rock solid, right? Because it went through the most testing.
The Founders Edition looks like it actually has a more novel and innovative cooling system than all the other party cards do. Like NVIDIA looks like, I've seen it. NVIDIA did try a little harder this time. Yeah, like it's the first time I actually wanted the Founders Edition, and then when this cap thing happened, I really want the Founders Edition. Guess what is literally impossible to get? The Founders Edition.
Yeah.
So
it is kind of, it does look, in my opinion, at least I'm the kind of person who doesn't like, lots of LED colors and plastic windows on the side of the computer. Yeah, the Founders Edition looks like a classy, normal computer component. It's like, yeah, that's what computers look like. It's not like some outrageous thing some teenager would buy for the computer that they use while they're in their race car chair or whatever.
Yep.
Now, which is what everyone else is selling.
One thing I will say is people who are trying to get these things now, like people are complaining that scalpers are the problem. There are a lot of scalpers, but scalping only happens when there is lower supply than demand. So
that's correct.
The scalpers are not causing this problem.
We talk about this every time, the scalping. And
I just got to remind you, because I see some people I know who listen to the show complaining about the scalpers. They are not causing this. However, it's interesting that they're selling these cards for about the price of a 3090. And the 3090s just came out, and I thought, well, if I can't get a 3080, usually the 90 is like not worth the money. Pay twice as much for like 10% more performance. But if I can only get a scalp 3080, I might as well just get a 3090. Nope. People, you can't get the 3090s either. They made even less of those.
Yeah, because who wants those?
Well, gamer nerds want them, and gamer nerds made the same calculus I made. If a scalped 3080 costs $1,500, why don't I just buy a 3090 for $1,500 MSRP?
Why don't I just buy nothing? Buy a 1070 that I have that's perfectly fine and wait it out.
Yep. The hard part is brand new old video cards don't get cheaper when new ones come out. That's one of the things that you can't.
You gotta get a used one that someone else is dumping because they successfully got a 3080.
Our friend Chase got 2 1080 titaniums for not that much money.
Yep.
Just SLI them. That won't be as fast as the 3080, but you know what? That is crazy fucking fast.
That's fine. You're going to be good with that for a long time.
Unless you're trying to drive an index at full steam, but not many people have that use case. All right.
Okay, is that enough news?
Unless you want to talk about if this, then that.
Just quickly. So there's a website I've been using for a very long time, probably since Beacon days, called IFTTT.com. You may have heard of this website. If this, then that. And what the website does is basically they, on their end, on their servers, they have implemented libraries to interface with the APIs of most web applications as well as many other things. And they allow you to then create rules on your own you get using OAuth, you give them authentication to the various services. Like so their servers can, for example, tweet on my Twitter account or, read from my Reddit account or whatever. And then you can create rules, if this, then that, to connect services together in ways that would be difficult for someone who doesn't know how to write software. So, for example, you can create a rule like, if I like a YouTube video, tweet about it. If I like something on Facebook, tweet it. If someone tweets at me, text me. If somebody, emails me, tweet the text of their email to the whole world. You can, if the weather is cold on Tuesday, text Rim. It's like,
if you're not like enterprise people or business people, this is no code integration. One of the biggest things people want to do with computers, the reason why computers can't do what people want, is that they want to integrate things they do with other things they do. And for reasons that is actually really, really hard. That's what developers do. Most coders, all the code they're writing just takes two things and makes them work with each other. That is like 90% of all code that anyone writes in the world.
Pretty much, yeah. So anyway, this is a great service. I've been using it for a long time, and most of what I use it for is backups. What I do is I say, if I like a tweet, as Pinboard, which is basically delicious, right?
Delicious.
Right. So I say, hey, I think Pinboard finally bought the remains of Delicious. So I have it set up to where it's like, if I like a tweet, Pinboard. If I like a YouTube video, Pinboard. If I upvote something on Reddit, Pinboard. Everything goes to Pinboard. And then on Pinboard, I back up Pinboard. So now I've basically saved, in some sense, most of my web activity, all aggregated in one spot. It's really great. So I had about 7 rules, different IFTTT rules to do this. IFTTT was free service. You could pay. I don't know what you got for paying. But
that's actually why early on I didn't trust it. I did not trust it to be secure in the early days.
Well, I didn't use it in the early days. I didn't use it for much. But then
I used it for things I didn't care about, but I wouldn't use it for like anything sensitive.
Right. This is literally the only thing I use it for is this backup to Pinboard feature. Right. I don't do anything else with it. So they're changing their mind about a few days from now, maybe a week from now. I don't know the exact date. You can look it up yourself. They are going to a different model where you have to pay if you have more than 3 rules, 3-rule limit, and then you got to pay. And I was like, all right, you know what? This is a great service. I've been using it for a long time. It does this one simple thing for me, and that's it. I'm not using it like crazy. So I will pay you. I'd be willing to pay like what, $10 a year, right? Something like that. $12 a year, 15 maybe, right? $1 a month for such a small thing.
Yeah.
They're charging. The price that they're asking for is like, almost like $10 a month. But because I'm like an existing user, right? I can name my own price. Is their site back up yet, or is it still down?
Their site is still down. 502 error.
The site's been down. They're having problems right now as we speak. But yeah, they allowed me to set my own price, and they said they would lock that price in forever because I'm like an existing person. But the minimum was still $2 a month, and I'm like, that's like slightly more than I'm willing to go for. So what I did is I cut myself down to only 3 rules. And I wrote software to replace all the remaining rules.
That's what software does.
And now I'm going to pay them nothing instead of $24 a year. So that's a thing. IFTTT. We'll see how they do. Are they going to get anyone to pay for it?
So I am actually more inclined to use them if I am paying them and they're having a more professional operation.
That's true, and you are going to get more, because part of their thing is that when you use them, you don't have a lot of flexibility, right? So like the rules that I replaced with my own code are actually much more powerful because I was able to fully customize the integration between the APIs. Your integration options are much more limited when you use IFTTT because your interface is more limited, right?
Yep.
But supposedly if you pay, it'll be more powerful, I guess, in some ambiguous way.
Now, what's interesting is outside of if this then that, like this is like the lowest consumer-friendly option in this space for generic like web stuff that normal people do. This is like one of the biggest. This is one of the fastest growing sectors of the economy. Is no code integration for enterprises, for companies, for small shops, for people. Like this is a weirdly big and growing space.
Yeah, they basically have no competition, right?
Well, they do, but they don't have competition at the consumer level.
Right, consumer level, but they don't have any direct competition, except the only direct competition they have are other services that compete with specific rules. For example, maybe somebody out there is using IFTTT as like they're a social media person at their job or something, or personally for their own project, for their podcast, right? And they're using IFTTT rules to like, organize their various social media accounts to be like, all right, when I tweet, post it on Facebook, post it on Instagram, post it on whatever.
Yeah, we just use code to do that. Like,
you could just use code to do that, but there are other programs out there that are like social media managing programs that do that specifically, right? So IFTTT could do a lot more than that. You could use it to, turn on your toaster when you get a text, right? Or whatever. But if you're only doing one kind of rule, right? Maybe you're using it for backups. Well, now IFTTT is competing with a backup tool, right? So if you're only using IFTTT for one thing, there may be a better tool. But if you're using it for the wide variety of powers it has,
as soon as it
doesn't have many competitors.
If you're stepping across like domains, like you're stepping across types of things to do, it's really
or inventing new and creative things to do that no one has thought of. Right?
Yep. Auto flushing toilet based. I can think of some fun ones. But anyway, if this then that is actually pretty cool, and I'm really curious to see where they go when they're actually going to charge money for it. Like, I'm going to look into this.
I'm curious to see if they'll get people to pay, because obviously if they don't get people to pay, they're going to be in trouble more than their website being down for a few hours.
Yep, because the danger is, are they going this route because they want to like make money, professionalize their service, etc., or are they going this route because they are not making money and this is a last-ditch effort to survive?
I think it's the second one. I think they need money to pay the bills.
Because if it's the second one, moving a workflow here is really dangerous if they go away.
Yep.
Because then you have nothing, and now you have to pay someone like Scott to write you code. Or learn to write code yourself, or or start a company that's going to make if this then that too, and probably run into the same problems they had.
It only took me a couple hours to replace those rules, so.
Yeah. But anyway, it's time for Things of the Day. So this was posted like in our forum, and I saw it around like, it's pretty cool, but content warning, it's got some flashing and it plays noise and it does some nonsense. But it's this website that is basically like Lane from The Wire, like the anime Lane, Serial Experiments Lane. It's like
LAIN. If you don't remember that anime, you're young.
Yep, that's a good way to put it. It's like this weird, cool, glitchy website that is like wired sound for wired people, and it's like playing music from Lane. But if you click on it, it says you are invisible. And if you tell it you want to go visible, it's just a series of fascinating like art experiments in a web browser. It's hard to describe. Like, just go check this thing out. It's beautiful and weird, but do not check it out if you have photosensitive epilepsy.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Yeah, that's it.
This is actually
what do you got?
My thing of the day is actually kind of old. It's not a thing of the day, really. It's a thing of a few months ago. I just forgot to use it as thing of the day back then. I'm sorry. But anyway, what this is, apparently, this seems 100% legit. I have no reason to doubt it based on the information. On Windows, Microsoft Windows is like there's a lot of Windows applications, right, that come with Windows that are sort of legendary, even if you don't use them. MS Paint, right? Microsoft, what's the thing that's not Notepad, but it's also not Microsoft Word? WordPad, right? Solitaire. There's a lot of Microsoft Windows applications, and somebody made those. It's like you don't think about it, but it's like, yes, someone's job was actually to make those things that every single person in the world uses, pretty much, right? Or has used at some point. Someone wrote that software. You could go to Apple and you could work on iPad, iPhone notes. That could be your job, right? So here on Reddit is a post from the person who, among other things, wrote mostly on their own, the Windows Task Manager, right? You press Control Delete, you click on Task Manager, and it pops up. And this person wrote that software that is that thing, and they shared some amazing and excellent information that is relevant to everyone who uses Microsoft Windows. Because if you use Microsoft Windows, use Task Manager.
Yep.
Use the software that this person created.
It's kind of amazing. Like reading
I
this
wish I
text.
could write a software that many people used. That would be something.
Like, if Task Manager ever hangs or crashes, do this thing. Old Task Manager will have to respond and start making sense with a secret code within a certain amount of time, or it'll launch another one. Like, I want to know more about the secret code now. What's coded in there for a new Task Manager to not run into an old Task Manager?
Yeah. Also, the Task Manager was written for Windows NT.
Yep.
Right. So it's from the late 90s, basically.
Yeah, he said this is all based on XP, as I left long ago, but it's still the same core app.
Yeah, it's like the Task Manager that you run today has obviously been patched heavily since then, but it's if you go back in the history of the code repository, it's that original one from Windows NT is still the one that's in Windows 10. It's just been patched and modified and edited over many years. So there you go.
All right. In the meta moment, I'm still stuck inside. We're going to be live to tape real soon, next weekend on Saturday at Mag West. It's technically
it's
our
that
first...
soon. Wow, I didn't realize it was that soon.
That's why the deadline was quick. We had to record that panel, edit it, get it uploaded pretty quick, and I think I got it uploaded the morning of the deadline. So
speedy.
Yeah, enjoy it. It's going to be on Saturday.
We're on the schedule, yeah.
Yep, Saturday. We basically took an hour-long panel, condensed it to go as fast as possible, and just talk about the purest nuggets of playing dirty to win games. So 60 minutes to 25 minutes. It's 24 minutes and 56 seconds long, this panel that we recorded. Play dirty to win, 7 p.m. Pacific time, 5 p.m. Eastern time, Saturday, October 3rd in the main theater.
Wait, you said it's 7 p.m. Pacific?
Yep.
So shouldn't it be 10 p.m. Eastern?
Oh, yeah, I had a typo in this thing. I copy-pasted.
Okay.
7 p.m. Pacific is the official time.
All right, so it's 10 o'clock New York time on Saturday the 3rd.
Yep, in the main theater.
Whatever that counts as. Is it Twitch TV / MagWest or something?
Yep, it's in the main MagFest Twitch.
Okay. So, yeah, I guess we'll hang out in that Twitch there, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, and then beyond that... we don't have any more cons coming up yet, so we're going to start working on some other projects we've been talking about. So just keep watching mine and Scott's YouTubes and hang out in our Discord, and you'll see what happens. We're not going to talk about any of these other things until we do them.
Yep. I do want to let people know, though, that, Essen, the world biggest board game convention, also just known as Spiel, which we've planned to go to, didn't go to, right, whatever. It's usually in Essen, Germany. Is obviously not being held in person this year. Yeah. But they're having Spiel online. It's going online just like all the other conventions, but it's 100% free. So check that out. It's going to be in October.
Yeah.
We're not going to appear there, I guess, but it's a thing.
I mean, we're not going to appear there unless we have a game to hawk of some kind.
Pretty much. It's for game hawkers.
Yeah.
So.
And we have a lot of half-finished games.
That's the only kind of thing I know how to make is a half-finished one.
If only you could just take 2 half-finished games, then that turns into a whole game, but that is not true.
That would be so great.
You actually just have 60% of a game if you do that. Mm-hmm. All right, let's just get right into it, because we've gone on for a while. There was a lot of news, but I wasn't allowed to do a tech news roundup because it's not time for that.
Right. That's right.
So, source code leaks. We talked about a specific one of these a while ago when there was a
Mario
source.
One.
Yeah, there was also a source engine one. There's a bit. These have happened.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah, these have happened off and on. But a part that we kind of glossed over was the sort of the generic ramifications of source code leaks. Why do source code leaks matter, and what actually happens when source code gets leaked generically, not a specific instance of some game engine or something.
Right. Okay. So first of all, you can't gloss over the fact that a source code leak can only happen when you're closed source to begin with.
Yep. Open source. I can go to Git and just get your source code. I can look at it.
Exactly. So a source code leak is when a company, usually a company, because it's very rare for an individual person to have a closed sourced application, but it could happen. is, you have a whole team or a whole huge company working on a project. Most of the developers, when you work on a project, almost all the time, unless it's very high security, you have access to all the source code, even if you're not working on all the source code. If you come and work at my company, it's like I have access to tons of source code of parts and programs that I don't work on at all, right?
Yep.
If you work at Google, I've been told that at Google, they have all their code in one repository. They must have some sort of controls that keep people out of certain parts of that repository.
Yeah, I mean, I work in regulated markets where, like, some source code is very, very granularly, like, broken up based on who should have access. Sarbanes-Oxley starts to become a factor.
Yes, but I'm sure, though, even if you did work at Google, even though, let's say my first day on the job at Google and I'm working on Google Maps, let's say, right? They hire me for the Maps team. I probably have access to all the Maps code, even parts I'm not working on. But, maybe I'm working on the restaurant review part. I probably have access to the directions part. And I, probably won't have access to, like, the search engine algorithm. But who knows? I don't know what's going on at Google. But you'll have access to code you're not working on. That's just how it is. Even at a Google type place. So you have a big company, the source code is secret. It's not shared outside the company. The company compiles their code and delivers only that to the world. And that's all the world sees are compiled binaries. Everyone has access to the assembly code.
Yep.
But good luck with that.
And all we'll say is decompiling is not the magic that non-coders think it is. Decompiling
people can decompile, they can reverse engineer, but it's a pain in the ass. It's a big pain in the ass.
Yep, for reasons that are way beyond the scope of the show. Right. But
if you want to learn about how an application, how it works, right? Decompiling it is going to be a pain. And also these days, in the 2020s, a lot of the source code you want is web applications, and that code is not delivered to you, right? You make a Google search, you send your search query to Google, they send you back answers. You don't even have the assembly code of the Google search engine to decompile in the first place. It's on a server.
You have a black box of data in, data out.
Yeah, you don't access that. So accessing that source code is incredibly valuable to know how it works even if you have access to the assembly, knowing how it works without having to go through a whole pain in the ass process of decompiling and reading assembly code and figuring it out. So it's extremely valuable to get this source code if it's a valuable, worthwhile program that people use. So it usually happens because someone who works for you leaks it. That's
it's
the most common way.
90% of the time when source code gets leaked, it's an inside job.
Almost all the time.
And the rare cases where it isn't, we'll get to that later. How it gets out is not the interesting part.
Rare cases where it isn't are usually sometimes I see like old source code get leaked after a very long time. That's because maybe somebody who had the code work there at some point stopped working there, had a copy, and then leaked it way later.
Yep, got disgruntled. There's a lot of reasons why they might do that.
Someone bought a laptop that wasn't erased, stuff like that.
Laptop not erased or hard drive not erased used to be a primary source of that stuff.
Yep. Now you got to turn your computer in when you leave a job, right?
Yep. But what do you like? Why? Why do we even care? Like, what are you going to do if you have source code? Like, the thing most people assume is, if the source code of something gets leaked, then that thing is easily hacked, which is probably the biggest myth of source code leaks, because we have the source code to, like, TLS security type stuff and encryption, and yet you can't break the encryption despite knowing the source code.
Yep, this comes down to people misunderstanding the term security by obscurity, right? So people think that like moving SSH to a different port is security by obscurity. No, it's not. That's not security by obscurity. That's just hiding.
Yeah.
Hiding is good security, actually. We use hiding as a security a lot of times. For example, when a important VIP individual is riding through town in black limos that are armored, they have a decoy limo. That's good security. Yeah. Right? You don't know which limo to blow up, right? That's hiding. That's right. Security by obscurity refers to somebody being able to break your security mechanism simply by knowing how it works. It's like,
so case in point, you know what the best example of this is? Any lock.
pretty much any almost physical locks. Right?
Yeah, arguably all physical locks, but
arguably, if you watch Lockpicking Lawyer, there are some he can't pick. He usually just doesn't show them on his channel too much.
Yeah. But basically,
but even Lockpicking Lawyer says there's no lock he can't pick. There are just locks he can't pick yet.
Yep. But basically, with a lock, like if the thing that opens the lock is the key. And the key is a standard, like how keys work for this lock system, and then the code embedded in the key. But as a result, both the lock and the key have to basically know their own code, and thus you can access that code or learn that code somewhere. Like if I learn the code for a lock, I can make a key for that lock. There's nothing you can do to stop me.
But also, if you just know how a particular lock works, right, you don't need the key. Just by knowing how it works, you can manipulate the bits inside of it, with the correct tools to get it to open, right? And figure out what the key was. You don't necessarily need to have the key.
Yep. And code, like a lot of security, like encryption, what it's really doing, we've done a show on encryption a long time ago, I'm not going to dwell on this, but you could use the math to feel like if you know how the encryption works, you could do something to decrypt it, except for the fact that the amount of work that would take is disproportional and impossible in a reasonable time frame.
Right. So, for example, if I have a secret code, right, and it's like, aha, you don't know my secret code, right? Your secret code is ROT13, right?
Yep.
It's like, as soon as you know how ROT13 works, you don't need to know that 13 was the code. They might have done ROT12. It doesn't matter. As soon as you understand ROT, which is, if you don't know, let's say ROT1 is to take every letter of the alphabet and increase it by 1. Yep. So the word ass would become the word BTT, right? Because B comes after A and T comes after S. That would be ROT1.
Yep.
ROT13 is going halfway around the alphabet.
ROT13 came out of Usenet culture primarily as a way to mask spoilers, because ROT13, you don't need to worry about is this coded or coded or decoded text. Yep. All you need to know is that looks like ROT13. Just ROT13 it again, and it'll be readable. So you could post a spoiler in an all-text bulletin board in like the 80s.
The point is, if you know what ROT13 is, you understand how it works. Now you can break it, right? They're right. But if you know how public-private key encryption works, you can just watch a YouTube video that explains how it works. That won't help you break into someone's SSH.
Yep.
You can know. I taught you how it works. Look, you can't break in. You absolutely must have the key. Right? That's the difference between security by obscurity and not. So if you are using security by obscurity, right, where someone knowing how it works allows them to break in, it's not actually secure, then having the source code means you're fucked, because now they know how it works. You were keeping that a secret.
But the other area is if there's a
secure.
Yeah, if there's a vulnerability.
Right. Well, if you're actually secure, you're not just obscurity, then having the source code doesn't help them at all. They're like, oh, look, it's an implementation of a Diffie-Hellman key exchange.
Yep.
That doesn't help. Great. They did it properly. Now I can't break in.
But that's where now you're not attacking the lock. You're not attacking Diffie-Hellman. You're not attacking that, because that's rock solid.
Obviously.
You're attacking, did they use it wrong? Did they implement it wrong? Is there a library they're using that lets me bypass it? That's the kind of stuff you can figure out from source code. You can figure that out without source code. Most hacking does not involve source code. You figure it out by hacking at the system. But the source code, you might more quickly find one of those vulnerabilities. However...
or it just basically just allows you... It just really just makes life easier. It doesn't doesn't really change the game. It just makes it easier. So it can be like... all those security vulnerabilities, people find vulnerabilities and stuff all the time without source code. They're sort of come as people are working at them slowly over time. If your source code leaks, then there'll be just a pile of vulnerabilities all at once you have to fix.
Yep.
Because people will find them all very quickly.
In fact, they might find ones that you know about and already have a plan to fix. You just haven't fixed them yet.
Yep, that's a thing.
But look at other things, like the other aspect people talk about with source code leaks is, oh, well, if I have the source code, I can make the thing. And that's where it gets a little complicated, because just having the Windows source code without having some knowledge and context of the development environment, it might be difficult for you to just quote unquote compile it and have Windows working.
I mean,
It depends.
it might be difficult for a normal person, but I think as long as the source code is complete, a lot of source code leaks are partial leaks.
Yeah, that's
They're
really a good
missing
point.
lots of pieces, or they're only like they don't bring the entire source code repository. They're just bringing like one particular build, and that build might be a failing build with problems.
Yep.
Right?
Or like, oh yeah,
Something
this
like
is
that.
Windows, except half of this stuff is just references to libraries in other parts of the code I don't have the source for.
Here's a leak of, Windows NT, except it was halfway through development at this point. It's not the final version or whatever. It's like, it's not perfect enough. It's not complete enough that it's really giving you the whole picture. So, someone who really works hard at it, who has the skills, is going to be able to get value from it. But, even if it's a perfect leak, they'll get even more value, but there's still not a complete picture. But yeah, if you do have the source code and it's legit and you get it to run, now you can start doing fun stuff, right? You can make your own Windows. You can make Windows mods that you couldn't make without the source code.
Make a Windows
right?
that looks and acts like Windows 100%, except it logs keys and sends them to you.
You could find Easter eggs that were so hidden no one would have guessed them in a zillion years, but because you have the source code, you can now find them instantly.
But what you often can't do that easily, like games are a good example. If a game source code gets leaked, even with all the assets and environments, there's not much you can do with that. You can't just take that and make another different game that easily, because a lot of that code.
It's still a lot of work to make a game, but you could. Let's say you had the source code to what's a game that doesn't have open source code?
Oh, Slay the Spire. There's an example.
Yeah, you could make but Slay the Spire allows like modding, kind of.
True.
What's like a super closed source game?
That we care about and have an interesting example for.
Right. It can't be a cookie cutter genre game either, right? It's like, okay, you got the source code to an FPS. It's like nothing was stopping you from making an FPS.
Yeah, the work you'd have to do to make the FPS is like the work you have to do
Same
anyway.
amount.
Yeah.
Right. I guess what's a game with valuable source code? League of Legends, maybe, right? You get the source code to League of Legends. You run your own League of Legends.
You know what some examples
servers.
are? Some of the subcomponents of games, like highly proprietary, very good netcode.
Sure. Yeah, you could get that.
That's the kind of thing. Or
there's
like,
there's not a lot of secrets to that. It's just hard. No matter, even if they tell you how it works, it's hard to do.
It's more like you might be able to see a clever implementation of something, but to understand it enough to use it, you're probably going to have to learn so much that you spent the same amount of time you would have spent just building something.
And even if you got it, you suddenly now you need the hardware to run it on, right? So running, a local like application, that's fine. If you got the source code to Google and wanted to run your own Google, you don't have the computers to do that. You just you wouldn't be able to run that on your own computer, right? It's just not going to work. You need like this huge Google, enterprise cloud deal to run the Google search engine.
We're like, oh, I got the source code to a stock exchange. Yeah, that's like regulated code. Like, yeah, the government's got that too. You know exactly how it works. Like,
yeah, there's no secrets. They have to publicize how it works.
Yeah, by law, they have to tell you how it worworks. Casino,
exactly.
The software in a slot machine, they'll tell you exactly how it works and what the odds are.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, but
getting source code is not necessarily that valuable, but you still want to protect against it if you are closed source for a good reason.
Yep, like the example that causes the most trouble in the open source world specifically is drivers for hardware that are not well supported on Linux, like video card drivers.
Yep. And
that's where you need like a weird Linux distro with like, oh, everything's open source. And then I go somewhere else to get the closed source binary to make my video card work.
Yep. And this gets you into like the final area of source code leaks, and that's intellectual property problems.
Yeah.
And so obviously the company that lost their intellectual property, that was their trade secret or whatever, they're upset, right? So because now their thing they didn't want is leaked out. Whatever, who screw them, right?
Yep.
But now the problem is not so much for them. It's actually that you want to look at the source code to learn and to do fun things, right? Make your own mod of Windows or whatever. But looking at that source code now legally taints you as a developer.
I used to work at IBM. Do you know how much I had to sign to prove that I had never worked on Java?
Right, exactly. So, for example, SQLite, you know SQLite? That's an open source program. Well, but they do not take developer contributions, right? If you want to commit code to SQLite, right? Like you have a patch for them, like you have to become an approved developer to prove to them that they trust you and you're not someone who has seen proprietary like code, like you didn't work at Oracle or something that's going to taint SQLite, and get them sued because they're including code that is somehow belongs to some other company, right? If you looked at like the Mario 64 source code leak and then you go work for a different game company, right? And then something in your game is looking like Mario 64, like hey, why is that character jumping so well? What much better than all other games except Nintendo games, right? That jump is just such a good jump. Whoever did that must have played, must know the code of Mario 64 to get a jump that good.
If you played Mario 64 and by play and analysis reverse engineered the exact jump timing, that's cool. But as soon as you
really
saw
hard
that,
to do.
it is really hard to do. But as soon as you saw that source code, even if you figure this out on your own, it's hard to prove that you didn't use that proprietary knowledge you had to make your implementation.
Right. So whether you're working at a company or for yourself or for an open source project, you could taint the open source project or your company's work. If it's your own personal code you're running at home, who cares?
Yeah. If you're not a software developer, you'll never have a job being a software developer. Maybe you don't care either.
Right. But it could open up the open source projects you work on or the non-open source projects you work on at your job to legal liability if you have seen proprietary leaked code. So you might want to stay away from it, or at least stay away from leaked code that is in any way similar to code you are writing for something else, right? So if you're working in operating systems, don't look at a Windows leak. If you're working on games, don't look at a Mario 64 leak. But if you're working on operating systems, you're probably okay to mess around with a Mario 64 leak. Just don't go then.
Man, the taskbar just jumps at this perfect height. Like, ooh.
Right, exactly.
I think we're done. We've gone on over an hour.
We have. And yeah, but if you are a company or you are an open source project, you got to watch the people coming in to make sure they haven't.
Yep.
Right.
Hey, check out my performance optimization code for your database. And that turns out to be code they literally copy pasted out of Oracle. You're in deep shit now, too.
Yep. Don't accept that patch. Right.
All right. Solid show.
There's a problem saving the metadata.
I don't understand what's up with that.
No, the internet doesn't even have any Google results if I search for it.
Yeah, I looked in the KBase. Like, I couldn't find anything. That's weird.
Wow. A multi-track mixdown. Entire session. Wow.